Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shay Leese. I am currently presenting on behalf of the CSU Channel Islands Writing and Multiliteracy Center. Today's presentation will be on how to deliver effective capstone presentations, whether in a PowerPoint form or in a poster form. For those of you who are wanting to follow along with these slides on an electronic device, I have created a tiny URL there at the bottom of the screen for you. So that'll be tinyurl.com/capstoneci. I'll go ahead and give a few moments for anybody who is wanting to follow along to access that link. In the meantime, first and foremost, congratulations on making it to the end of your degree program. I myself am an English capstone graduate from CI myself, so I thoroughly understand the struggle and the challenges that you have faced so far, but I also understand that they are being incredibly augmented by the current pandemic situation. So thank you so much for making the time to watch this presentation, and thank you so much for continuing to make our university proud with your hard work. So if you have never worked with me before in the past, my name again is Shay. I work at the Writing Center in the Broome Library. We may have worked together prior on prior written or presentation assignments. I have put my email on this slide and the next slide, just in case any of you have any questions or concerns about anything that you have regarding your capstone presentations, so we can go ahead and make sure we can get that taken care of together. So just in case you did not know, the Writing Center still is open for business for online consultations. And more specifically, I am available to give you up to 60 minutes of free consultation every week online over Zoom on Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays by appointment. If you have any questions or concerns about your capstone that you feel do not require an appointment, please feel free to email me. Again, my email is here on the screen for you. Or if you do require a longer form appointment, please feel free to visit the Writing Center's website at csuci.edu/WMC, where we can set you up with a 1-hour online Zoom consultation with me to make sure that anything that you have concerns with regarding your capstone can be addressed. I can help you with anything regarding PowerPoints and posters. I can help you with any content or research concerns. I can help you with citations, anything that you need help with your capstones. You just go ahead and let me know, and I will be more than happy to take care of you. Now, as what we're covering today, I just wanted to make sure that we did cover the oral slideshow presentations, so the PowerPoints or Google Slides, or whatever other sort of presentation software you might be using. I'll be covering general design concerns for that to make sure that you have an understanding of what makes for an effective slideshow presentation, at least from the perspective of visual rhetoric. Now, we'll also be covering the poster presentations for those of you who will be undertaking that design instead, and I will be giving specific advice regarding those projects from the perspective of creative writing projects and research-based projects, whichever you might be doing. Now, again, since this is an online format, it will be difficult for me to give you specific Q&A time, but again, please feel free to email me with any concerns you might have, and I'll be more than happy to address them as soon as possible. Now, when talking about oral slideshow presentations, regardless of whether you're using Google Slides, Prezi, PowerPoint, etc., it's important to remember what the intention of the slideshow itself is. It is intended to be a visual aid for the benefit of your audience, to enhance their understanding, to enhance their retention concerning the information that you are giving them regarding your capstone experience. Now remember that as it stands right now, you are the individual who has the most knowledge, has the strongest understanding of what your project is. However, your audience member is not going to have the opportunity to read the entirety of your project outright. So your goal is to essentially transfer as much understanding of your project as possible in the time frame given, using both your speech and the visual aid itself. One of the best ways to identify how to enhance your audience's comprehension and retention regarding your Capstone experience is to first talk about how to eliminate any obstacles that you might accidentally put into play regarding their comprehension and retention. Essentially, what makes for a bad oral slideshow presentation? So it stands to reason that if a good slideshow, in terms of a visual aid, is one that helps your audience understand and retain information, the opposite is also true. What you want to avoid is any obstacles that you put into place concerning your visual design that inhibit your audience from understanding your information or causes them to remember you for the wrong reasons. Now, one thing to keep in mind concerning the choices you make with your slideshow presentations is that it is extremely easy to cause disengagement with your audience with poor visual design. For example, if we have a slide, exaggerated, yes, but if we have a slide like this one, where at the outset we just understand that it's painful to look at, we struggle to read yellow on green, the text itself is blurry, it's going to cause your audience members to be challenged. It's going to cause them to not want to engage with the material, and it's going to cause them to ultimately not want to interface with the information that you are providing to them simply because of a flaw in visual design. Another flaw that you want to attempt to avoid is information overload. Now, again, like I mentioned prior, you have a complete and comprehensive understanding of the nature of your Capstone project. But it is not your goal in the time frame allotted to transfer that complete and comprehensive bank of knowledge to them. You want them to understand your journey. You want them to understand the major notes of your project and your development process. You do not want to subject them to information overload. If you subject them to too much information over too short of a time span, you are going to be doing your Capstone project a disservice. You want to make sure that any visuals you are using are not compromising the integrity of your project. For example, a picture like this may have been totally well-intentioned to be a picture of a cute dog, but unfortunately the blurry nature of the image itself only strikes to transfer an image of some sort of terrifying monstrosity. This is something that you want to avoid in terms of compromising your own project's integrity by presenting images which are not in alignment with the message that you are attempting to portray. Another exaggerated example, but layout is also important. You don't want to overload your audience with irrelevant images, using 5 images when only one will get the point across. You don't want to have anything extra that might look childish or compromise the academic image that you're wanting to portray for the purpose of this Capstone project. Remember that you are going to be presenting this as a culminating project, as a representation of you and the academic rigor of your degree. So you want to avoid using anything that looks like cheap clip art, cheap word art, that essentially looks like image spam in order to avoid making your project look childish. Now, as English majors, we have an understanding of tone and how strongly tone can impact the conveyance of information from one individual to another. And that is entirely true in a slideshow presentation as well. You want to make sure you avoid any sort of tonal dissonance by, for example, like in this one, having facts about the Civil War juxtaposed against a smiley latte art, right? Having casualty statistics being flown in with animated text, right? You want to make sure that the design choices that you are making aren't just consistent in terms of academic professional image, but also in terms of being in line with the nature of your project itself. Introducing any sort of tonal dissonance is extremely difficult to recover from when implemented in any sort of visual project. Of course, remember to be concise, Having a PowerPoint that is overwrought with information will cause your audience to be unable to interface with it. It'll cause them to be distracted from what you are saying because they are distracted by what you are showing them. This, again, is an exaggerated example, but is one of the basic fundamentals that you want to abide by when shooting for visual clarity. Now, of course, errors in presentation can't just be design-oriented in nature. You can also have compromised delivery. For example, standing in front of the slide and becoming a part of the projection yourself is ultimately going to cause a failure of your audience to be able to read that information correctly. Now, I understand this probably won't be a problem for many of you because I understand we are going to be migrating to a virtual format for these presentations. But again, I just want to make sure that you understand that when you are giving these presentations, you want to make sure that you are not doing anything of your own volition that compromises your design in terms of, for example, speaking too quietly, speaking too loudly, speaking too swiftly, speaking too slowly, doing anything that might cause your audience to be distracted from your presentation as a result of your own physical action. Now, the good news is in the years of Capstone advisory I have been providing, I've never seen anybody actually make mistakes those egregiously, right? They're just put there for the purpose of providing a fundamental baseline of comparison. So you understand that you already are fairly confident in terms of what makes for a good PowerPoint. You know what mistakes to avoid. So in terms of tightening it up and orienting yourself towards questions and concerns that are specifically applicable to the English experience, we can talk about that right now. Now, historically, the Capstone presentations have been assigned to run approximately 5 minutes. I do not know if the parameters have been altered, but with that in mind, you do want to actively keep in mind the pacing of your slide content from both a macro level and a micro level. What I mean by this, let's break it down first from the macro level perspective, right? You have a designated amount of time. You have a specific goal to meet during that time frame. So you want to make sure that everything in terms of your overall larger scale design perspective is oriented towards meeting that goal. So with that in mind, we need to actively consider what the goal of your overall Capstone presentation is. Ultimately, the Capstone presentation is meant to demonstrate that you deserve your degree. You've been working on it for 4 years, if not more, and you are attempting to demonstrate that the level of knowledge that you have and the level of specialization that you have regarding the English major is worthy of this degree. You want to prove that your project is of suitable academic rigor and the result of intentional design choices. And you also want to demonstrate how your project is connected to the larger overall study of English and any related discourse that you may be connecting to. Ultimately, you do want to make sure that you are getting your audience as excited about your project as you are. You chose this project because it's something that's important to you. You chose this project because it is something that is either linked to your future career, to your future ambitions, towards your future education, just to your overall interests, or the combination all thereof. But what you do not want to do is attempt to demonstrate the entirety of your finished piece. For example, some of you may be writing a young adult novel. Some of you may have written several chapters of that novel, but your goal is not to give them a plot summary of every single chapter that you've written. You may have written an extensive research paper looking at stereotypes in a particular form of media, and you do not want to give them a comprehensive lit review. You don't want to give them a comprehensive breakdown of your findings. Regardless of the nature of your project, you are wanting, instead of focusing on giving that comprehensive experience, you want to give them all of the major notes of your journey. Let them know about the why behind this project? What is the creative impetus? What is the rationale between the various stages of development and decisions you've made? What is the theoretical framework you've been using? Who are your inspirations? What are the implications of this project for the future? Those are the important notes that you want to bring to the table that would essentially not be able to be brought unless you yourself were there to tell that story to your audience. One of the first things that you'll want to do from a macro level design perspective is create an outline, essentially, of what essential pieces you want to bring to the table and what order those pieces should go in. Each of those pieces corresponding to one or two slides in terms of your overall design. Let's say that, for example, I am doing a creative piece, and I recognize that I have a very short time frame in which to convey all this information. How effectively can I use that time in terms of giving them the overall experience without going too deep and trying to give them the entirety of the project itself? I might want to start, for example, with a cold open, where I essentially just start by reading my piece. I immediately choose to take control and set the tone of my presentation by reading an excerpt of my own writing that I feel establishes the exact sort of tone that I want them to have in mind regarding my project. Maybe that's when I go into the actual introduction afterwards, where I introduce myself, I introduce the name of my project, I introduce who I am. Then maybe I go into a summary of the project itself. I talk about what goals I had in mind at the outset. I talk about what inspirations I had in terms of the literature, what media, what theory, what coursework, who on campus inspired me to go into this direction with my capstone. Now, of course, you do not want to assume that everybody in the room will have the same background as you, right? You may be absolutely enamored with Levi-Strauss, with Althusser, with Judith Butler, right? But the idea is you can't assume that everybody is going to have the same level of background or expertise or experience as you. Make any deeper dives as necessary to help people understand, even if it's just contextually speaking, why these figures you're introducing into your project are significant. You want to use this opportunity to inject that academic ethos, that credibility, that spirit of academic rigor into your presentation. This is the time to do so. Because as a creative writing emphasis grad myself, I can speak from experience, that shared struggle that we have to quote-unquote prove that our work is academically rigorous and born of true intent, right? So this is the opportunity to do so. This is also the opportunity to speak in depth regarding your design philosophy. Tell us what your creative process is. Let us know how you generated this material. Do you take a top-down sort of design perspective where you have an overall vision and you try to make pieces that fulfill that vision in terms of characters or settings or scenes? Do you pull from micro-level design concerns from the down up, where you're kind of looking at individual moments, memories, details? You want to create things that encapsulate and surround those? Let us know what your approach is, and don't take any of your design choices for granted. If you chose poetry, why poetry? If you chose a novel, why that genre, right? If you chose short stories, why did you do that? If you chose a specific perspective even, this is your opportunity to justify all of those creative decisions. One of the things that I like to advise people to do in terms of making sure that you are delivering your capstone as an experience is to engage with it in a way that it is something that you have actively been not necessarily struggling with, but engaging with over the course of the entire semester. And one way to do this is to let the audience know what is something that you experienced in terms of a hardship, in terms of an overall difficulty. Was it, for example, difficult to get into the head of a male or female protagonist? Was it difficult to engage with a perspective or a genre you haven't done before? Was it emotionally challenging to engage with a specific topic or certain subject matter, right? Was there simply a lack of material in terms of foundational research concerning your topic? Let us know how you overcame that obstacle, and let us know how you came out of this as a stronger writer. Come out of that by letting us know what specific high notes you had in terms of what either you learned, how proud of you are what you produced, or where you're anticipating going with this. If this, for example, is part of a larger scale project, let us know what that trajectory is. If you are planning to use this as part of some sort of maybe a application for a specific grad program or something, you can absolutely let us know. By the end of the presentation, in your conclusion, it is advisable to let us know what your future plans and implications thereof are, to let us know essentially where you're going next. That's an important part to end with in any sort of capstone. Regardless of the decisions you make regarding the inclusion of any of these elements, the order of any of these elements, you want to make sure that you're able to defend and justify any of your choices as informed and intentional. Now, let's say some of you are doing some literary analysis or research papers instead. Instead, what you'll want to do is essentially attempt to introduce yourself from the outset. Let us know who you are. Let us know what you're working on, and attempt to forge some sort of emotional connection with the subject matter. Let us know what the driving purpose behind this project is. One of the favorite rhetorical devices that I like to advise people to use when making these sorts of projects a reality is to engage with the kairos of this project. Essentially, that's the timeliness of the matter. Why this? Why now? What makes this the optimal time to discuss this? What makes this an urgent time to discuss this? What makes this a critical time to engage with this, right? Let's say you are engaging with stereotypes in the media of some regard. Why is that important to just discuss now? Let's say you're engaging with queer theory in some regard. Why is it important to engage with that now? If we're engaging with some sort of class struggle or political spectrum, why this and why now? That's important to establish early on, as sort of the so what concern that we often hear about when engaging with any sort of research project. You want to let us know outright what your goals were. What was your research question? What sort of thesis were you operating with? What sort of hypothesis did you have if you had one? Furthermore, you want to let us know what sort of literature that you are engaging with in terms of either actual literature written, in terms of scholarly writing, in terms of theoretical writing. What were you engaging with to help resolve these issues? Again, just like with the creative projects, you do not want to assume familiarity. Provide clear summary and individual introductions of the material as required to ensure that your audience is not lost from the outset. Furthermore, if you are engaging with specific texts like say young adult literature or with class theory, make sure you let us know why the specific selections you made were made. If you are engaging with certain essays from Althusser, for example, why those specific essays? Why him? You want to let us know insight into your process. What sort of methodology did you take concerning the analysis of the work or in terms of the research regarding the work? Let us know whether you were engaging specifically in a lot of close reading, if you were engaging in more historical level research. Let us know what sort of theoretical frameworks you were using or creating. And just again, like the creative projects, you want to let us know during your presentation what sort of challenges you found. Were there any research gaps of notes? Did you have to apply a theory or a lens in a way that you've never done so before, that nobody has done before? And how did you grow? How did you personally grow as a result of this project? Of course, you want to let us know what your findings and conclusions were. You should spend a good amount of time on this because you want to let us know what's significant about those findings. What sort of connections were you able to make? What essentially are you proving? You again want to leave us on high notes. What are the implications of this material? And you also want to let us know what your future plans are. What is the trajectory you're going to be taking next regarding this project? Remember essentially that you are wanting to try to establish some sort of relevance and connection to the state of the current world. One of the things that we struggle with in the English major is that feeling of needing to justify our research, in the grand scheme of academia. So please make that extra effort to essentially talk about why what you're talking about is important. Why is what you're talking about critical? So essentially those concerns are what I'm talking about when I'm talking about macro level concerns. in terms of the overall structuring, the overall outlining of what I'm planning to talk about, and justifying the order and the structure that I want to use to convey all that information. That way you make sure from the very outset you're not missing anything, you're not leaving anything out. From a micro level concern, that's when we're looking at things like individual choices on individual slides, individual concerns with positioning, etc., that allow us to assemble a complete package that is conveying the information that needs to be conveyed and not distracting from that mission. One of these micro levels of concern is color. Depending on your level of experience with visual rhetoric, you may have a thorough or a not so thorough understanding of color theory. But the good news is, it's something that if you do not have a particularly strong background in, I do want to advise you that you should probably fall back on a reliable color template as available in Google Slides or in PowerPoint, etc., to ensure that you're not doing anything that would be essentially compromising of your vision. On this chart, you can see that there are multiple concepts that you can explore concerning, for example, how, hey, some colors might be analogous to one another because they're adjacent, therefore they create more of a harmonious sort of design, right? You can see that some colors have some traditional meanings, take it or leave it depending on your belief in color psychology. But if you're attempting to convey a certain tone, you want to make sure that, for example, you have a relatively high energy subject matter, you don't want to use low energy colors. That being said, the reverse is also true. You don't want to use high energy warm colors for something that's meant to be more somber, right? Either way, your color choices should be intentional, and you want to have a sense of uniformity through the entire presentation. This is critical. If you have, for example, for no discernible reason, different color choices on every individual slide, your presentation is going to look more chaotic and disorganized and lacking in intention. And that, unless that is, thematically relevant to your presentation itself, is something that you would want to try to avoid. Try to only use contrasting colors when it is meaningful or attempting to create clear emphasis. And again, like I mentioned before, don't be afraid to stick with a traditional color template. The idea is that most of the color templates that you will find in Google Slides or PowerPoint, etc., are designed to be legible, are designed to be classic in the sense that they are tried and true. And if you, of course, need any advice in terms of the visual design from a color perspective, please feel free to work with me. I'll be more than happy to provide any aesthetic level advisory on that. Again, exaggerated, of course, but you do want to think about the spacing of elements on your individual slide. This is a very extreme example for demonstrative purposes, but again, what I want you to recognize is that if you have glaring elements of negative space like this on a presentation, it's going to look unfinished, right? So unless, for some intentional reason, you want to create that vision of scarcity and emptiness in your presentation, this is something you want to avoid. You want to make sure that in your presentation, you're actively controlling space, whether or not that is negative space, space where there's nothing there, or space that is being used for the purpose of demonstrating particular elements like text and images. Now, as mentioned prior with this slide, you want to avoid overcrowding your slides with information. So this is kind of meant to be a juxtaposition against the previous slide, where if negative space is left uncontrolled, it'll look unfinished. If you have something like this, it'll instead look overworked and overwhelming to the audience member. Now, you absolutely do want to make use of pictures. The idea is that a visual presentation like a PowerPoint is intended to make use of visual aids. So, for example, let's say you are introducing elements such as a theoretical lens. You want to talk about an author or a book of theory that was particularly useful to you during the exploratory phases of your project or during the analysis phases of your project. Maybe you want to show a picture of that book cover as you are speaking of it. If you're speaking about a particular author who was inspirational or foundational to your project, it may help to have a picture of that author. If you're going to be talking about pop culture elements, for example, that you want to talk about that are relevant to your project, insert them. But remember, that ultimately the images are intended to augment what you are saying, not to replace what you are saying. For example, let's say I was engaging with the text of Sarah Ahmed in my presentation. However, I just left the image on the slide and I never once spoke about her before transitioning to the next one. I would be doing my audience a disservice because they would think I had forgotten something, and I would be doing Sarah Ahmed a disservice as well by having her on the screen for no reason. Now, ultimately, any of your micro-scale decisions regarding images, text, and color, etc., will want to be in alignment with the tone that you're attempting to set. You, again, as English majors, you are well aware of the impact of tone on any given project, and any choices that you make should help support the tone that you're attempting to strike. They should remain congruent with that message. You want to make sure that you actively design each of your individual slides in congruence with that mission, and make sure that nothing on there is distracting from that vision. Any sort of dissonance that you create between the slide design and your own understanding of the project will absolutely create a disconnect between your presentation and the audience, and that'll ultimately damage the integrity of your overall presentation, and that is something you do want to avoid at all costs. Now, of course, this may seem like a no-brainer, but I want to make sure I emphasize this. Please rehearse and practice your presentation as many times as necessary before you go to the final copy. Now, I understand that it may be difficult to find a live audience in the current health climate. However, I do want to advise you that the Writing Center, again, is available for online consultation. So if you need anybody to, for example, just sit and listen for an hour and help give feedback regarding your slides, regarding your delivery, we are absolutely more than willing to accommodate you on this. All right, you don't have to submit something that nobody has ever seen before the actual submission, right? You can get something that is well practiced and well worked by yourself and a tutor just by making an appointment with us. That being said, I am available 4 days a week, and I absolutely love making time for English Capstone students. I may be a little biased concerning, my experience as one myself, but the idea is that, again, if you want to make use of that hour time frame every week, you just go ahead and try to make an appointment with me. We also have a plethora of experienced English tutors who would also be able to help you in case you want to work with anybody else or you need an additional pair of eyes. Right? I want to make sure that you are feeling confident about the material that you are presenting, and that you can essentially feel proud of the project that you are submitting through this medium. So in summary, you want to make sure that you are making informed and intentional decisions regarding your slide content and design at every opportunity. You should be using your slides to visually engage your audience and not provide any sort of distraction that would inhibit the retention and comprehension of the information you are providing to them. And you want to make sure that the slides that you are using are supplementing your oral presentation and not comprising the entirety of the presentation itself. You want to make sure that you're acting interested in your own topic at all times, because there's no better way to get your audience disinterested in your project than by appearing disinterested in it yourself. And please, try to have some fun with it. This is meant to be a project that is your time to have the floor with something that you've had total creative freedom with. So please, do so accordingly. So this terminates my segment on PowerPoints and slide design, and I would like to transition into the segment regarding research poster presentations. Essentially, what you will be doing when you are creating a research poster is you are attempting to go ahead and create a visual representation of your project that theoretically you would be standing alongside in terms of being able to give a breakdown of your experience, a breakdown of what your project is about, with that poster being your static supplemental image, right? Traditionally, these are reserved for research conferences, the likes that maybe some of you have attended before, like, for example, at SAGE, etc. in the past, where students from various schools and various disciplines might come together to present concerning their research projects over the course of the last given year. Here's an example of one that we have listed at the university itself. And you can see we do have a link here where you can go ahead and click on to get some of the templates that we have like this that already have some of the university branding, some of the university's typical font, etc. on it with a variety of color choices for your perusal. As you can see on the link here, we have already provided an excellent amount of information and resources here that I would trust regarding the design of these posters. Here are the templates as promised. You can see that they're available in various sizes. You'll want to use the size and color as appropriate for your particular project and its requirements. And you can essentially just download them as PowerPoint files, and you will be able to rearrange the elements, add text, add images very, very easily in terms of executing your overall design. The most popular form of research poster is that commonly referred to as the newspaper column format. And essentially what it does is it divides all of the information in a logical order from left to right in various columns that all proceed top down in terms of providing sort of a folded out brochure type of look, where essentially the individual who is looking at the poster will be able to have a familiar layout that won't necessarily challenge them to an extreme degree. Everything will be presented again in a logical format from top down, left to right, in a very logical fashion that allows the reader to have maximum levels of comprehension and retention without any sort of obstacles being laid out in terms of the visual clarity or the design. Now, as you can see, this is one of the templates that I downloaded from that website from the previous slide, and you can see that it already abides by the newspaper column format. In the event that you are wanting to add more columns, remove these columns, you can do so freely. For example, you can copy and paste ones new into existence as you so please. You can delete ones as necessary in order to add images and what have you, and ultimately everything is already cleanly laid out in the format that you would be able to start from and then personalize thereafter to make it into something that's truly representative of your own project. Now, if you feel that that structure might be too constricting of your overall vision, you can take advantage of what is also known as the visualization model, which is something that allows you to have more branches, essentially more of a flowchart oriented design in terms of helping people reflect upon the trail of information. You still abide by the traditional heading at the top where we have the name of the project and the names of any contributors, but then you can see that it does have a sort of deviation. We still have a slight abidement to the top-down, left-to-right format, but then everything else in the upper right-hand sector sort of abides by its own logical flow. And that's something, again, if you feel that the newspaper column format is constricting you too much and you want to get a little bit more creative, by all means, feel free to do something that you feel is more representative of your overall project. Regardless, do be conscious of the fact that the reason for the top-down, left-to-right format is because as English readers, we traditionally have a means of prioritizing information in such a manner that we do want to make sure that we are having the information provided in that expected layout. This is why, again, we like to put the title and the name of everybody towards the very top, and we want to keep in mind how the eye would be naturally traveling across the page itself. Additionally, you do want to keep in mind that scale is important regarding the legibility of your poster. You'll note in this top example at this heading, it's kind of very difficult to parse this information compared to the lower example. In the lower example, we have a clear visual hierarchy established concerning the scale of everything. We have the two logos of the related parties for this poster being given clear positions of prominence in the real estate in the corners, and they're also the largest elements here. We have the title being the largest textual element. We have the authors being the second largest, and then we have the individual further credentials there being smaller towards the very bottom. We have a clear level of prioritization being established here as a result of the scaling design. Now, for example, if you're wanting to prioritize elements in your poster for a creative writing project, this is theoretically how I would do it. For example, Maybe we have something at the top left that is, again, following the format of the PowerPoints, having some sort of excerpt for the sake of establishing tone at the very top left. We have the next logical element, the introduction concerning the what or the why of the project. What sort of inspirations were we drawing from? Maybe we have some visualizations at the center. Maybe we have more excerpts if we don't have any specific visualizations in mind. Maybe we have breakdowns concerning characters or locations of significance. You have a lot of room to play with a creative project like this, so make sure that you play with it accordingly. But ultimately, at the very right-hand side, we do want to make sure we do have those conclusion elements, like what are the take-home implications? What do you want people to remember about this? And tell us the next steps about the project in your future. And then, of course, make sure to give any sort of citations, any sort of references, acknowledgments to any faculty or other familial inspirations, maybe, etc. You can have that all present there in the lower right-hand corner. If you are doing a more literature-based project, maybe you have your abstract or any kind of research questions in the upper left. You have your introduction following that. Maybe give us a breakdown of your lit review afterwards. Give us some significant highlights and findings. Then, similarly to the creative project, you give us those sort of conclusion elements and any sort of citations and acknowledgments as necessary. Now, the accuracy of the information on this slide is going to drastically deviate given the current state of the pandemic. Now, historically, I have always advised individuals getting any sort of poster printed to go visit the Coast Copy Center, but I imagine that if you are needing to get a poster printed this semester, it's probably just going to be a digital format, so you're not going to even need to get something like physical or anything like that, right? But in the future, if you ever do need to get something physically printed, like a research poster or what have you, Coast Copy over by the bookstore does a marvelous job of doing it, and they do it really cheap, right? But again, I wager, given the lack of a need for a physical poster, given the state of the university and everything else right now, this is probably irrelevant, but I'll just keep it here for posterity's sake. Ultimately, though, this does conclude my presentation. I am more than happy to provide any additional assistance or help or feedback as required to anybody who needs it. You can go ahead and contact me at my email if you have any quick questions, or if you would like any prolonged consultation, again, up to 60 minutes per week on any sort of project you have. You can go ahead and check with us at the csuci.edu/WMC to check out the procedures for scheduling an online Zoom appointment with me. Again, my name is Shay Leese. It's been an absolute pleasure to record this presentation for you, and best of luck with your capstone, and best of luck going forward for your future. Thank you.